our wonderful agenda team, and we didn't want to make them stay around. So
Gotcha.
we're going to quickly just touch base with him once this meeting's over.
Yeah, find out where the mayor stands.
Yep.
And, you know, this is a different equation than the last.
Yep.
The last ask, I think, had to do with kind of a council of governments. This is more of a roll SNRPC into SNS.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Okay,
have a
perfect. Then I will
lot
get the
to get-
intro going.
Okay,
We're
thank
good.
you.
I'll get this rolling. Perfect. Thank you for joining the April meeting of the Southern Nevada Strong Steering Committee. A few things to remember for those on the line. Please mute and unmute yourself. If we hear background noises, staff will mute your line. This meeting will be recorded. Madam Chairwoman, we are ready for you to begin the meeting.
Thank you, Marin, and good afternoon. I'm Chairwoman Deborah March for the record. I'd like to call this meeting to order, April 29th, 2021, of Southern Nevada Strong Steering Committee. RTC staff will begin with a roll call of committee members and introduce staff on the line. Marin?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Marin Dubois, Management Analyst for the record. I will call out the names of those I've confirmed are on the line. If you do not hear your name, please let us know at the end. I have Mayor Deborah March.
Present.
Nancy Amundson.
Present.
Then Shane Ammerman.
Present.
Mike Casey.
Present.
Robert Fielden.
He's muted.
Yeah, he's on there. I can't unmute him. He can speak up when he gets a second. And then we have Councilman Brian Knutson.
Brian?
Did we lose him?
I'm here.
Still-
Can you hear me?
Oh, there he is. Yep,
Here.
we can hear you. Thank you for confirming. Zane Marshall
Present.
and MJ Maynard
Here.
and Janet Quintero.
Present.
Thank you. Andrew Rother
I'm here.
and Sandra Rosenberg. And Marco Bellotta.
Present.
And then I see Nicole Bungham just joined us.
Wonderful.
Yes. Morning.
Thank
Morning.
you. Also, please know that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. David Swallow, Deputy CEO, Mr. Andrew Kelman, Acting Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Ms. Ray Lathrop, Manager of Regional Planning, Mr. Nathan Goldberg, Manager of Transit Planning, Ms. Michelle Laramie, Senior Regional Planner, and Mr. Paul Gulley, Management Analyst. We also have Mr. Greg Servant from Clark County joining us, who will be giving us a presentation. I also want to provide a few reminders. Please state your name for the record before speaking. Voting will be done verbally as a group, calling for ayes and nays. If there are no nays or abstentions, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. The chairwoman will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. Thank you for your participation in today's meeting. I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you very much, Marin. We can move on to the next item.
All right. Thank you, Chairwoman March. Ray Lathrop, Manager of Regional Planning for the RTC for the record. The first item on the agenda today is to conduct your first citizens participation period. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspends the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006 and for the health and safety of our community, this meeting is being held virtually. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtcsnv.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Ms. Marin Dubois, Management Analyst for the RTC, will read the public comments received by the RTC. Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Ray. And this is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words being included in the written record. Do we have any comments, Marin?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Marin Dubois, Management Analyst for record again. No comments were received.
Thank you. This concludes the public comment period. Next is on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the January 28th, 2021 Steering Committee meeting. Are there any comments or questions from the committee regarding the minutes? If there's no comments or questions, do we have a motion from the floor to approve the minutes?
This is Zane Marshall, Director of Water Resources from the Southern Nevada Water Authority on the record. I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. And that motion carries. Next item is Ray is to receive an update on the Stadium District.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ray Lathrop again for the record. The next item is to receive an update on the Stadium District Plan from Clark County. We've invited Greg Servin from Clark County Planning Department to present this item, which was suggested by members of the committee in the January meeting, as the stadium is a project of significance for the whole region. So I have Greg on the line.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Servin. I'm with a senior planner with the Clark County Department of Comprehensive Planning. I'm here today to talk about the Stadium District Plan. Next slide. So the lead agency for this project is Clark County and RTC. We also have our primary consultants, which is Rafi Architecture, which is handling the land use portion of the plan, and Atkins, which is handling the transportation portion of the plan. We also have our sub-consultants, Kimberly Horn, Paceline Consulting, and Erica Villas Consulting. Next slide. So the Stadium District is a 1.25 square mile area around Allegiant Stadium, which is bounded by Tropicana Avenue to the north, I-15 to the east, and the Union Pacific Railroad to the west and south. Next slide. The objectives of the plan is to develop an overall vision for the district and provide a toolbox of solutions that will guide the implementation of the vision, identify potential investments, and to inform the Transform Clark County Master Plan Development Code rewrite that is currently going on. Next slide. This slide just kind of shows the planning process we went through. I'm just going to glance over it. But basically, we started off by collecting data and looking over best practices in the country. We also identified key stakeholders, then held a number of stakeholder meetings and where we developed the vision and went through some analysis and visioning exercises until we got to the validate and deliver point of the process where we developed the draft plan. Next slide. We did a number of public engagement activities. We had a project website where people can go on and learn about the plan, also keep up to date with the plan. We also conducted 2 surveys, which we had over 764 survey responses. We also had 4 stakeholder TAC meetings, and the stakeholders mainly consisted of property owners, business owners, tenants, government agencies. We also had representatives from UNLV and the Raiders, amongst other people. We also conducted a pop-up meeting at Sam Boyd Stadium during a UNLV football game where we conducted a survey and engaged the public. We also met with a number of professional business associations, including the Tropicana Business and Community Coalition, and NIOP, and other groups. Next slide. So what we learned from the survey and from the public outreach is that people want the district to be a mixed-use community. They want it to be a safe environment that has amenities, including entertainment and restaurant uses. They want the district to be family-friendly, where they can feel comfortable bringing their children to. They wanted to see public open space be developed in the district. Right now, the district doesn't really have any open space. They want the district to be walkable and pedestrian-friendly. They wanted multimodal transportation choices like walking, biking, transit. They also expressed some concerns along the lines of infrastructure, as the streets right now are very narrow sidewalks, and they were concerned how it would be able to handle the crowds that would come with the stadium. And there were also some concerns about parking, but since the survey, the Raiders have added parking and come up with a plan, but since the stadium hasn't opened yet to full capacity, there's still some concerns out there. Next slide. So existing conditions in the district have a number of issues. The built form of the district is intended to accommodate industrial uses. So basically, the way it's developed, it's more catered towards semi-truck traffic. There's large industrial blocks in the district right now, which makes it very hard for pedestrians to meander through the district. Buildings are set back behind surface parking lots, which makes it hard for pedestrians to get to the buildings. Also, amenities and services are lacking in the district. And right now, it's a very non-connected grid network. If you look at the graphic on the right, you can see like a quarter-mile distance as the crow flies. It can take someone about 15 minutes just to walk to that distance, just because of the lack of connectivity in the district. Next slide. Other issues, streets and lighting are not designed for pedestrian and bike movement. As you can see in the lower left photo, it can get, some parts of the district are quite dark, and pedestrian wouldn't feel very comfortable in such a situation. And some of these other photos, so you can see how narrow some of these sidewalks are, so they can't really accommodate large crowds walking along these streets. Pedestrian crossings are also limited to signalized intersections. Like I mentioned earlier, with the long blocks, people would have to walk quite a distance just to get to a crosswalk to cross the street. And as I mentioned earlier, the district lacks infrastructure that supports new uses currently. Next slide. So during our stakeholder meeting, we developed a vision, which is create a dynamic district with a comprehensive mix of uses that supports the continuation of current businesses while providing opportunities to transition into a thriving destination for entertainment, hospitality, business, and sports. Next slide. So we developed a number of goals to support the vision. Goal 1 is to promote flexibility within the built environment to accommodate both event day and non-event day functions. Goal 2 is to provide connectivity and access to and throughout the district to improve mobility by encouraging the use of alternative modes of transportation. Next slide. Goal 3 is to enhance quality of life by creating a vibrant district with best practices for urban design. And the last goal is promote a vibrant economy by enabling multiple options to support individual property and business owners' intentions to remain or transition to new uses. So just to kind of touch on that goal, we're not trying to push anybody out of the district. We're basically, viable businesses are allowed, can stay as long as they want. So we just want to make it appealing to everyone. Next slide. So during one of the stakeholder meetings, we had a land use visioning exercise, and basically what came out of it, the general thoughts were that the stakeholders wanted to see commercial entertainment uses closer to the stadium. They wanted industrial uses closer to the railroad. And they wanted to keep the residential uses out of the airport environs, which is the south of that yellow dashed line on the graphic to the right, in order to avoid conflict with the airport. But the bottom line is the stakeholders expressed a desire to have flexibility on their properties, to have a variety of uses or mixed uses on their property. Next slide. In the plan, you'll see there's guidelines on building design and massing. And it talks about minimizing building setbacks and having ground floor activation where you might have commercial or office uses on the ground floor. And basically by moving the buildings up to the street frontage, it creates a more lively street frontage and makes it easier for pedestrians to get to the buildings. The plan also encourages awnings and covered patio in order to provide shade for pedestrians and then for any outside dining. It also talks about building height. As the buildings get higher, it encourages the buildings to step back in order to prevent a canyon effect along the streets. And it also encourages rooftop gardens and patios. Next slide. The plan also encourages open space and public art. Right now, the district has no open space or public art. And those things, as we know, can benefit the community. It helps improve health and increases value of surrounding land, enhances the appearance and beauty of areas, provides sustainable benefits, increases sense of community engagement, and also establishes a place-making potential. Next slide. So right now, the block development of the district consists of very large blocks, which makes it very hard for pedestrians to get around, and there's very few route options for pedestrians to get around the district due to that lack of connectivity. Next slide. So the plan encourages, with future block development, to try to increase permeability, to try to break up some of these large blocks, whether it might be a private street or just a pedestrian walkway. The goal is just to try to make the district have better connectivity and make it easier for pedestrians to get around. And just to be clear, we're not requiring any dedications as part of this. We're just trying to encourage people to, as they develop, to try to break up the block and allow for more permeability throughout the district. Next slide. With future block development, we're trying to encourage the buildings to be pushed up against along the perimeter of the block in order to, as I mentioned, to create a more lively street frontage. And we would like to encourage the parking to be behind the building so the vehicles and cars aren't the focal point of the area. We also like to try to encourage people to put pedestrian pathways through their block in order to make it easier to get around the district, but also to provide connections between buildings on the interior of the block. And there's also opportunities for people to put in open space within the block if they so desire. Next slide. The plan also talks about street design, where it encourages complete streets to be developed, where we prioritize pedestrian and bike activity, try to integrate public and private pedestrian areas, and find opportunities for amenities along the street. Next slide. So on the right, there's a graphic that shows maybe what an ideal street network could look like in the district. We also broke the streets down to different street types, where you have a neighborhood street type, which is the 60-foot local streets. The festival streets, which is also 60-foot streets, which is shown as Alibaba and Procyon here. But that's the street where we would have flush curbs, where you could maybe have like a farmer's market or have events or other activities that you can have in the streets. The main street typology covers the 80-foot collectors, the multimodals, the 100-foot arterials. The event category is just the streets right immediately adjacent to the stadium. And the industrial street category just refers to the areas that might remain industrial, where the streets might be left alone for now and may not need to be touched and developed till later on when more commercial gets farther out to that area. And we also have the pedestrian pathways that help break up the blocks, as I mentioned earlier. Here it's shown kind of like it's plus signs, but as I mentioned, it doesn't have to follow that exact alignment. It could be a meander through the block. The key is just try to breaking up the blocks to allow for pedestrians to get through. On the left is some of the guiding principles we use to develop the street network and street topologies, which are provide an interconnected street network that supports compact development patterns and alternative mode connectivity, prioritize walking and bicycling as the primary mode of movement within the district, provide safe, efficient, and comfortable routes for all modes to increase the use of alternative modes of transportation, integrate the district's transportation network with the region's transit to maximize alternative mode choice, integrate smart technologies to the district's infrastructure, and integrate urban open space with transportation infrastructure. Next slide. So in the plan, with every street type, there's a number of options we offered for people to consider. So some street options will have bike lanes and parking. Some might have just bike lanes. Some might have nothing. For example, this example here particularly this one shows bike lanes and parking as an example. We also have the pedestrian realm areas on the perimeters of the edges of the street to create a more wider walkable area. Next slide. This is just a festival street example, which shows how the curves would be flush with the street. And also this one particularly happens to have an activated median, which kind of creates a little park in the center. Next slide. So with the pedestrian realm, there's an attached sidewalk option and a detached sidewalk option. But both options consist of an amenity zone, which is where you would find your landscaping, maybe the enhanced trash enclosure, benches. And then you have your walkway and clear zone, which is the clear pathway, clear unimpeded pathway for pedestrians to walk on. And then you have the building edge and setback. So you can have your building either setback 0 feet right up against the sidewalk, or maybe you can move back up to 20 feet where you want to create an outside dining area or an outdoor open space area. Next slide. This map shows the different modes of transportation in the district all put together into one map. The blue line represents the proposed Vegas loop that the Boring Company is working on. And then the purple lines show the bus routes in the area and potential proposed bus routes. The yellow lines show potential bike routes, and the green just shows the sidewalks in the area where people can walk. Next slide. So as far as next steps, right now we're in the middle of compiling and reviewing public comments on the draft plan, which has been posted online for the past few weeks. After we review the comments, we're going to make revisions for the final plan. Then on May 11th, we'll meet with the Metropolitan Planning Subcommittee. Then May 27th, we'll meet with the Executive Advisory Committee. And then June 1st, we'll meet with the Planning Commission. And June 2nd, we'll meet with the Board of County Commissioners, who will accept the plan if they so choose. Next slide. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I am more than willing to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much, Greg. That's very exciting to see the improvements that are planned for that area. Committee members, do we have any questions of Greg or comments or thoughts to share?
Chairman March, this is Andrew Rother from the City of Henderson. I had a quick question of Mr. Servin.
Sure, Andrew.
Greg, well done. I just had a question. You showed a zoning map. I was just curious, are parcels being rezoned, and is the county initiating those zone changes?
No, we're not. That wasn't a zoning map. That was just a visioning exercise map to kind of get an idea of what people might want to see, how the district laid out. So we're not forcing any zoning on anybody. These are just kind of toolbox suggestions that we're offering to help provide guidance. A lot of the actual zoning code things that will come out will come through the Transform Clark County process, because this will be passed on and kind of roll it into that project. So yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well done.
So Greg, in Oakland, they had major tailgate events around the stadium. Is there anything like that planned for this plan in this facility?
Well, a lot's going to have to come from the private developer side to integrate some open space. We like to try to require open space with development, but we don't have really any public land to just create a huge park on our own. But we're trying to encourage the creation of open space in the district, and hopefully we can achieve that.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments or feedback?
Hi, Mayor March. I do have a question
Yes.
for MJ. Great question for you on the multimodal circulation where it shows the proposed boring tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Where exactly would you have those at-grade pickup and drop-off locations?
I don't know if all the details have been ironed out with the boring tunnel, but from my understanding, the stop for the stadium is on the southwest corner of their property, from my understanding. But I don't think that's been actual stop station and how it's going to look like it's been finalized yet.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Sandra Rosenberg from NDOT. Again, great presentation. I love the concept. I guess my question, you sort of answered it already. You know, great plans are great if they can be implemented. So, and you said you're not forcing anyone to do anything. So are you getting buy-in from the property owners? And you mentioned it's going, you know, hopefully adopted as part of the Clark County plan. But what's the impetus for property owners to act on this and start developing in alignment with this plan?
Well, I think right now, just having Allegiant Stadium in existence, it's going to spur development in the area. And I think a lot of that property owners have expressed desire to eventually bring in commercial uses and activities into the area to try to capitalize from Allegiant Stadium. This plan is not going to be something where you flip a switch and all this is going to happen all at once. This is going to be a slow process as time goes on, and as things slowly get developed, it'll start to snowball and more people will come in. But at least we'll have a framework to try to help guide development as it comes along.
Well, and I think you've given them some great ideas, so hopefully that occurs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, this is Mike Casey with the district. Just some comments. As the stadium as it currently stands, certainly there's been some struggles as far as accommodating the potential for tailgating. I know there was, I believe, some designated sites in which to do some potential satellite tailgating with transportation in. But in terms of activity within proximity to the stadium, this is a great opportunity for those within the area to potentially provide that, something similar to Cedar Plaza with T-Mobile. But with that said, I think that venue just has a typically, I mean, given the frequency of events that center holds, as well as just the natural flow of traffic over there on the Las Vegas Boulevard, relative to this area, that could be somewhat problematic. Just curious in terms of, has there been outside interest thus far as providing some of those amenities? Because as far as having the, I guess, on-site dining and potential entertainment options, given you wouldn't have the frequency of activating the site as you do at T-Mobile or some of the other entertainment venues, is there kind of external interest to bring additional amenities closer to the stadium to have more frequency as far as activation as a greater draw to the area?
Yeah, the plan encourages trying to get some other attractions in there as far as maybe some museums or art galleries into the area. But as the area develops, when you start getting more restaurants and bars, the people are naturally going to be drawn into the area. But like I said, it's going to be a process. It's going to take some time.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing no others, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate that very interesting and valuable presentation.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ray?
All right, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The next item on the agenda is to receive a presentation on the RTC's proposed transit service changes. We have Mr. Nathan Goldberg, Manager of Transit for the RTC, on the line to provide the update.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman March, members of the committee. Nathan Goldberg, Manager of Transit Planning for the record. As noted, I'll be giving an overview of our proposed transit service changes, which are slated for implementation on August 8th. Next slide, please. While we are out for our public comment period, we are planning to educate our community that we have received approximately $303 million in federal aid to dedicate to transit and paratransit services. These proposed service changes are all part of Onboard, our community's long-range mobility plan. And these proposed service changes will connect approximately 185,000 residents who previously did not have access to transit services into the transit service area to employment opportunities, schools, other essential services. These enhancements will also provide more equitable service across the valley. Next slide, please. We are doing this utilizing 4 different pillars. First of these is access through implementation of the RTC's largest geographic expansion of transit service since 1993. This includes 2 new routes, several route extensions, all of which introduce basic fixed route transit access to those who are currently unserved but need transit service, including nearly 10,000 people living in poverty. 3 efficiencies, which include introduction of an innovative microtransit pilot that will provide on-demand service as a paratransit fixed route hybrid service in the Southwest, Enterprise, and West Henderson areas. This will help reduce our cost per passenger of the traditional paratransit model and improve access to fixed route transit. Innovation through the First Transit Lab initiative, which is using an innovative approach to provide faster and more frequent service to some of our busiest bus stops along Charleston, which is one of our highest ridership corridors. This is anticipated to help us improve our speed by approximately 25% and to include 50% additional frequency in the core area between Rainbow and Nellis. It also allows us to pilot software on our buses on Charleston to improve scheduling and on-time performance. We are also demonstrating continued commitment to equity within an established community by having the restoration of service along routes 207 Alta Stewart and 209 Vegas Owens on the weekends, and also improving weekend frequency on routes 210, 203, and 119. Next slide, please. This map kind of provides a general overview of everything that we're going to get to in detail, but what you're really looking at here, just kind of covering things quickly, the red lines are our new routes as well as our route extensions. What you see in blue are the weekend frequency enhancements that we just talked about. The purple line is Charleston, where we will have our transit lab. The pink in the north are the paratransit service expansion areas. The red dots are the known clients. And then finally, in the southwest and West Henderson areas, we have the kind of the off green color there is the microtransit, paratransit pilot area. Next slide, please. So what is all this doing? Kind of what are we getting for all of this? Well, there's some pretty impressive numbers here on this slide. As noted, we're looking at access to 185,000 residents who previously did not have that access. 21,000 of those are currently living at or below the poverty level, 18,000 seniors, over 13,000 with disabilities, and almost 80,000 are non-white or Hispanic. But we also have connectivity to over 23,000 employment opportunities. I'd like to note we know that number's bigger now. The most recent official data that is available is a couple of years old, and of course we've had some significant growth in the last year or two. So we know that to be a little bit bigger. We also have 7,000 resort corridor employees that will now have direct access to transit and would be able to commute into the resort corridor, bringing in 43 new child care facilities, and then 6 new grocery stores, many of which are located and providing access to communities that were food deserts. All of this is at an additional cost of about $7 million. Next slide, please. So the next series of slides here, we're kind of going to go over each area piece by piece and give a more of a micro level of what's going on. So looking at the southwest Mountains Edge area right here, we have multiple new routes and extensions that kind of reach down into that to the Blue Diamond Cactus area and bring service to almost 70,000 residents, almost 14,000 jobs. There's about 4,000 resort corridor employees that live in this area, over a dozen new child care facilities and schools, and 4 grocery stores, which also includes the only Walmart that was left in the valley that we did not have service to, which is the one on Blue Diamond. So we'll be bringing that into the equation as well. Next slide, please. Expanding on that a little bit, you can get a closer picture here of the proposed microtransit pilot area. We're really excited about this one because we believe this to be a first of its kind in that we will be merging fixed route clients with paratransit clients on that microtransit service. So how that's intended to function is if you are a fixed route client, you have to stay within this zone. You can, of course, connect to fixed route transit at any of the bus stops that are along those red lines that you see there, and then continue on your journey on fixed route. If you are a paratransit client, you can, of course, have your normal door-to-door service that you have today. But you may at some point share a ride kind of, in almost like a TNC model within that area. And this, of course, helps us save on cost over the standard paratransit model. Next slide, please. In the West Henderson area, you can see along the top of the screen there is the continuation of the new Route 221, which traverses primarily on the Cactus Horizon Ridge alignment east-west throughout the valley, but also does continue all the way down into Boulder City in the southeast. However, what we also can do here because of that new Route 221 is repurpose the south end of what is today Route 122. Route 122 currently, when it gets to Maryland and St. Rose, heads over into the Green Valley area. Instead, what we'll be able to do is move that the other direction and get into the West Henderson area and cover multiple new employment opportunities, as well as some high density residential that's growing there along St. Rose. We have the Resort Casino. We have Amazon facilities, some Pinecrest schools, Levi's, and multiple other employers in this area who will be provided access via this service. Next slide, please. Continuing on Route 221 a little bit further to the east, you have here kind of in a portion of the Green Valley area and over to the Horizon Ridge intersection. The route is traversing along Horizon Ridge. It also, in doing so, that fills in a peninsula that we had as a gap in paratransit service area. Next slide, please. Moving up to the other end of the valley here, in the far northwest, in the Providence Sky Canyon area, we have an extension to the CX, and then we also have a portion, the kind of the farthest west portion of New Route 220, which primarily traverses the Ann Tropical alignment. However, in this area, you see it on the Deer Springs and Wallapai alignments. This brings additional needed service into that growing community, including 30,000 plus residents, many employment opportunities, a couple of grocery stores as well, including the new Smith Superstore. Next slide, please. This is the opposite end of that Route 220 on the Ann Tropical alignment, which includes service that goes into the area, kind of the North Las Vegas warehouse district, if you will. This includes the Amazon warehouses that are up there, Fanatics, Honest Company, and there are some others as well. And it terminates over at the truck stop along Hollywood, adjacent to Las Vegas Motor Speedway. So again, this provides initial access to a large number of employment opportunities that rely on transit. Next slide, please. Here we have the North Decatur extension. If we think back to the first slide we were looking at in the southwest, there was also an extension to the south end of Decatur too. So the Decatur route, Route 103, is extending in both directions. This is showing the extension on the north side. Currently, it terminates at the Deer Springs alignment. This will take it all the way up to the Grand Teton alignment. It goes past the DMV now. I know that was one of the requests that we would get very often, was that it was about a half-mile or three-quarter mile walk to the DMV, if you include traversing the parking lot and everything. So all of the residents and employment opportunities up in this area will be very, very pleased about this extension as well. And then, of course, the paratransit service area expands with that. Next slide, please. So with this slide, we're going to focus on the changes that are happening in the urban core. These are primarily the frequency increases that we discussed, as well as the transit lab on Charleston. One geographic change of note here is that on Route 119, between Sahara and Spring Mountain, we will be moving off the I-15 alignment and onto the Sammy Davis alignment with the opening of Resorts World. That segment now, we will be offering employees that access to the back door. As we know, the back door of most casinos is the front door for their employees. So it'll be important. That'll be an important change for us as well. But of course, we have the restoration of the weekend services on the 207 Alta Stewart and 209 Vegas Owens. Those were things that we had scaled back during the initial portion of the pandemic a little over a year ago. And now we are able to, with this additional funding, restore those services to those communities. And in addition, provide additional weekend frequencies on a couple of important routes where weekend frequency would vary between every 30 and every 60 minutes, and now we can get it to every 20 to 30 minutes, depending upon which route we're talking about. So those will be game changers, especially for the Route 203 folks. That's a busy commuter route for our resort corridor employees, and of course we know the weekends are when things are happening down there, so that'll be a big assistance. With regard to the transit lab on Charleston, what we are going to be implementing will allow us to increase speeds up to 25% faster, and also allow us to have 10-minute service at certain stops in the core area of the route, which is defined as between Nellis and Rainbow. If you're making a full crosstown commute currently on Charleston, it's one of the slowest routes out there. It averages between 8 and 9 miles an hour. That can be a painful experience and to traverse the valley with. And so in doing this, if we can decrease that time and increase the speed of the route, that'll be a great thing for many of our customers that need to make longer trips on the 206. Next slide, please. So as noted, we are in the middle of the 45-day public comment period. That public comment period did begin on April 15th, and it goes through May 31st. We will be headed to the RTC board for potential approval on June 10th, and then implementation of the service changes on August 8th. Next slide, please. So as part of this, we have identified many goals to connect, to educate, listen, and learn to our community, learn from our community. We are collecting many surveys and engaging our community at a wide variety of events. We have multiple events every day that we have staff at out in the community, 7 days a week. We're just wherever there's an event where we think we can hear from people and have a voice, then that's where we're going to be. So look for us for that next month or so out there as we look to hear from everybody and what they'd like to see. So with that concludes my comments, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Committee members, any questions or comments of Nathan? Well, I can tell you that I'm enthusiastic about the changes that are being proposed, and I think we'll be adding additional services to those with the greatest need. And obviously, going into the Southwest that has had a need for service for a very long time. And certainly I'm excited about the microtransit that we're going to be seeing in West Henderson, as that's a major employment corridor. And when we see the opening of Haas Automation, we want to make sure that we're getting workforce out to the plant and the operations that are out there as well. And I'd encourage all of you, if you have opportunities available and you want the RTC to come out and make a presentation on the service changes, we are in the public comment period, and they are looking for places and locations to do that community outreach. So just encourage you to reach into the RTC and let them know if you have an event you want them to attend. Any questions or comments? If there's no other comments, then we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Ray?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Ray Lathrop for the record. This item will be an update from our team about our future housing research that is included in our current annual work program. We've been working on this project over the last year, and we've actually held 2 technical advisory group meetings, which consist of planners and some of our community development and housing resource staff at local agencies. I do apologize for anyone who is on our tag. We held it yesterday, so this is going to be a very similar presentation. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, these are the goals related to Southern Nevada Strong and housing. Generally, the goal for housing is to provide housing choices and ensure that our future housing stock is diverse in type, and that allows for accessibility and affordability for all residents within the valley. Next slide, please. So what we've done so far is we have based a lot of our research on 3 external studies, one from Washington, D.C., one from San Francisco, and one from the city of Reno, that all look at housing challenges a little bit differently. They've looked at the balance between jobs and housing, the affordability needs of their future community, and the housing preferences by community demographics. So in our first TAG meeting, we kind of discussed with those stakeholders the type of research that our team could provide and help with. We've done some interviews as well for some experts in the community, including individuals working in the economic development space, to understand how our housing needs might also interact with our future workforce and industries. Ultimately, we've decided to develop and publish 3 separate research briefs on the jobs housing balance, affordability, and housing types, which we've currently drafted and shared with the stakeholder group. We did, and those are out for kind of comment and feedback right now. So one piece that I want to cover as some of our research relies on is this open source model called Envision Tomorrow, which is a housing balance model. This was used during the Southern Nevada Strong planning phase, and so it's a little familiar within some of the background and research that went into the SNS regional plan. Basically, this model takes our current population and projections into the future, and in order to kind of look at our future supply and demand and affordability. It relies on Esri Tapestry data, which is kind of a census categorization that defines age stage cohorts that are used to predict future housing needs and challenges and opportunities. So each one of our team members spent time diving into those 3 research areas, and we're just going to provide a very high-level review of some of our initial takeaways as our stakeholders are continuing to finalize and review and provide feedback on our research briefs. So the next slide is on jobs housing balance, and I'll introduce Michelle from our team to present on this.
Thank you, Ray. Michelle?
Thank you. Yes, Michelle Laramie for the record. So just as a quick refresher, we did look at this data a little bit previously in a committee meeting, probably a handful of months ago. So the jobs housing balance, it's one of the common tools that is used by a lot of regions to explore the spatial relationships between housing and jobs and other services. So basically looking at the location of housing around the region. So as part of our study, we did want to do some high-level analysis to kind of better understand what our jobs housing balance and housing location looks like in the region today. So in the table on the left, we see that over the last decade, the jobs housing balance in the region has steadily increased. So essentially what that means is that our housing has continued to locate farther away from job locations and job centers in the past 10 years. We also found that transportation data shows similar trends. Our vehicle miles traveled are increasing throughout the region, and that's been a similar trend over the last decade. So it's very likely our residents, our community is spending more time on the road, potentially spending more of their income on transportation costs. And depending on the area in which people are living, there may also be a limited access to economic opportunity as well. There isn't a lot of hard numeric data that we can take away from this particular piece of our studies, specifically because we don't have quantitative regional jobs housing balance goals in the region. But we do know that the complete communities theme in the regional plan talks a lot about compact development and has a lot of language around jobs housing balance and co-locating in the region. So again, these numbers, these surpluses and shortages that are shown on these graphs, they really just show what the quantity of housing that would be needed in order to achieve a specific balance about jobs, between jobs and housing, but they don't necessarily tell us anything specific about our supply on the whole. And when we get into the affordability and the type pieces with Paul and Ray, they'll tell us a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. So we also looked back at the scenario planning that was done as part of the SNS regional planning effort, as well as the recent growth forecasts that are done by the RTC as part of our regional transportation planning process. So here we see the baseline scenario on the left, which looked at what the region would look like if the historic growth patterns of the past continued, while the preferred land use vision is in the center, and that scenario used community input from the SNS planning process to kind of guide what jobs housing balance might look like in the future if the complete communities theme of the regional plan is achieved. And I apologize, it looks like that preferred land use is actually on the left, and the population growth and employment growth are shown here. Sorry, I mixed up my slides. But basically, these growth forecasts, which were done recently for the Regional Transportation Plan 2020 through 2050, they show that our future growth looks more like the baseline scenario than the preferred land use vision. So our population growth is continuing at the edges of the region, while employment growth is continuing to happen around some of our current industry clusters, as well as kind of near the edges of existing development. So at this time, the region is predicted to remain pretty auto-centric, and jobs and housing will likely continue to be dispersed throughout the region. But I do want to note that the forecast is based on the region's policies today, and there's a lot of changes happening which aren't yet reflected in the in our forecast. So the City of Las Vegas is currently adopting a new master plan, which does have some jobs housing goals in it. The City of Henderson is also in the middle of a development code update, and Clark County is in the middle of their process for updating their master plan and development code as well. So it's very likely that the next forecast will look quite different. So we hope to continue to expand upon this research over the next year, and there is a potential to kind of keep exploring these relationships in the future. And with that, I'll pass it on to, I think, Paul is next.
Yeah.
Great. Paul Gully for the record. Perfect. So I'm just going to spend a minute talking a little bit about the affordability research we did. I think we are all very much aware of the fact that affordability has become an increasingly important issue in Southern Nevada, especially in recent years. When we talk about a housing crisis in the region, it's usually within the context of affordability. And there are countless news stories and data points and academic research that illustrate the fact that housing prices have been increasing fairly consistently and maybe even skyrocketing the past few years, and affordability is becoming less and less attainable. And the graphic on the left is definitely an oversimplification of things, but in a very general sense, we've seen consistent population growth over the course of the past decade or two, and we've seen lagging housing production, especially since the last recession, and this has caused, along with some other factors, housing prices to increase over the course of the past decade, and earnings have just failed to keep up with the cost of housing. So rents from 2010 to 2019 are up 20%, new home prices jumped nearly 90%, and earnings increased only by about 9%. And this disparity is probably even greater today since those numbers, again, only go through 2019. And so today, roughly 1 in 3 households in the region are considered cost burden. So this translates to roughly 290,000 Southern Nevadan households spending more than the recommended 30% of their income on housing-related expenses. And when we dig into the local data a little more, we see that clear differences exist between renters and owners. And while numbers have improved a bit for homeowners coming out of the recession, renter affordability has remained relatively unchanged over the course of the past decade. Next slide. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to focus on the renter numbers a little bit more. especially because that's where our biggest need seems to be. So when it comes to our rental market, there's an extreme shortage of units affordable to households earning less than $35,000 per year. So currently there's roughly 145,000 households that fall within these lower income brackets in the region who are renters, but there are only roughly 60,000 units available in the region that are affordable to them. And if you click once, I think, there we go. So you can see there's quite a shortage here at the lower end of the income scale, which forces the majority of these lower income households to occupy rental housing outside of their price range. And a contributing factor to this that we note in the report brief is the fact that subsidized housing, and specifically subsidized rental housing, is very low in the region. So only about 4% of our rental stock is comprised of HUD-assisted units, which is among the lowest rates in the country. And at the other end of the spectrum, I think another graphic animation will show up. We do have a bit of an oversupply at the with higher end rental units. And looking ahead to 2050, the Envision Tomorrow Balanced Housing Model kind of estimates or predicts these general trends to continue. So by 2050, the model estimates that we'll need roughly 340,000 new units in total, and 180,000 of these, so more than half of them, need to be rental units affordable to households at those lowest income brackets if we do want to meet future need. So this means roughly 90,000 units are needed with less than $900 per month rent, and roughly another 90,000 units are needed with rents less than $400 a month, which again puts a spotlight on our lack of subsidized affordable housing. I think I can turn it over to you, Ray, to talk a little bit about type.
Yes, our last topic in housing is housing type. This is really important because the research shows that housing type preference is largely based on 3 different factors: residence age, a household size, and income. And when we look at future population growth for Southern Nevada, it looks like all 3 of those things are changing. So currently on the left here is a pie chart of our existing residential types, mostly single family detached housing, which is very similar to most communities that are about our same age and of course in the Western United States. On the right here is a graph that shows the types of housing as it relates to ownership or rentals. So it's important to note that overwhelmingly the majority of our single family homes are owner occupied, while the majority of our multifamily housing is renter occupied. And that happens a lot because our multifamily may not be owner accessible, like maybe they're rented apartments. So when we think about housing type, we also know that it implicates the ability for households to kind of gain wealth and increase their financial assets. Next slide. So like I said, demographic changes are expected to be pretty large. On the left here, we see the difference between the population today and the projected population for 2050. I'll note that for the population at 65 years or older is actually planning on doubling. And so our population will be a lot older and we'll have many more seniors that make up our residential population. We also see a significant growth expected within our Hispanic and African American communities, so changing kind of the demographics of our community. And also there is expected to be very little change within our population of children, which means that as our population increases, the percentage of children in the population will actually decrease. And so we would expect maybe that would mean that household sizes would be smaller. So all 3 of those, household sizes, age, and possibly income, because seniors tend to be on a fixed income, will dramatically shift by 2050. So what the model shows us is a few different things. One, the housing preference of our existing population, and that's the third bar on the graph here on the right. And so the first bar here is our national kind of average around housing stock. The second is today's housing stock in Clark County. The orange and the blue are single family homes. The blue is just large lots and the orange is small lots. And then if you look at the third column, that's the types of homes that are predicted that our current population, based on our existing population, would actually want. So right now, they actually want maybe larger homes than we have available and less apartments than we have. And you can see that show up in the affordability, some people not being able to afford maybe the homes that they want. It could have to do with the location of some of those large lot homes as well. The final graph here on the right is the housing preferences that we might expect in 2050. There's a dramatic change in the types of homes between large and small homes. So that orange area is 33% of the housing preference would be for small lot, single family homes. That's possibly reflective of our aging community, those that are interested in smaller spaces. So as we plan for the future, housing type is really going to be needed to diversify. We might think also about looking at our existing stock and maybe adapting it to the future's needs, whether that's creating multi-generational opportunities or aging in place and other things when it comes to our demographic shifts. Next slide. This research was really interesting for us to kind of dive into. It was very complicated and interconnected with all the other issues. If you're interested in reviewing some of these research briefs, we use the term brief because they're just kind of one topic at a time, although that doesn't actually describe the length of them. They're about 10 pages each and have some takeaways as far as things that we could be researching further. So if you're interested, we're happy to share those for your review as well. We are continuing to keep housing in our work plan for next year, which I'll talk about later. So if there's any additional questions around housing and what kind of research our team can be providing, we are open to having that discussion and finalizing our next steps in the summer. We think that most of this research is really helpful for our local jurisdictions in their future strategizing or planning, and particularly within future funding applications or proposals, because we really have defined some real numbers to the needs in our community. So we hope these research briefs, when they're final and on our website, are tools for all of you to help implement the regional plan. And with that, we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Committee members, any questions or comments regarding the housing research?
Madam Chair, this is Brian Knudsen, if I could.
Yes, Brian, yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I spent a lot of time on this particular topic and would love to those documents to be circulated amongst all elected officials at the local level. But my question comes into is what is the strategy for making sure this data is available to state legislators? Because from a local level, I think much of our ability to implement some of these strategies really relies on the state having a much more active role.
Yeah, currently as these are being reviewed, we are kind of taking some input as far as who a potential future audience would be. So we'll definitely take that one, note that as well. Yesterday, someone suggested that we also share this information with affordable housing developers too, to help kind of booster their application and proposals as well. So after we are complete, we'll definitely visit kind of an outreach or a publication type of strategy.
Thank you. Any other questions? Brian, anything else?
If I could, I'd be happy to, Brian Knudsen again for the record, I would be happy to help or at least be a part of those conversations with the private sector, because I don't think it's only the low-income housing developers, of which there's only a handful, but private developers could also jump into the game as well if the conditions were right, which would be, again, set at the state level. So as
Yeah.
you are ready to meet with developers, I would love to be a part of or help facilitate in any way possible, because I've had many of those conversations, and I think there's a lot of relevance to the work that you're doing, so I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Ray, this is Bob Fielden.
Bob?
Hi, this is Deborah.
Hi.
So my question is, have you prepared any briefs regarding urbanization versus following traditional kinds of suburban projects?
We have not. That hasn't been part of our research so far. We are collecting input and suggestions for next year, so we will write that one down.
Yeah, I think that would be exceptionally important for the Valley, especially in light of all of our sustainability issues and climate change. We need to be working towards finding more efficient ways to live here in the Valley more sustainably, and housing is a big component of that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
This is Sandra from NDOT.
Sandra?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. This was great work, by the way. This is definitely needed, and it helps kind of put some context to things. So one, I think I know the answer, but were transportation costs factored into the affordability?
Not directly at this point. That is one of the ideas or opportunities we're considering for future housing research, is quantifying some transportation costs within the housing costs. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, because that comes up a lot in terms of where we locate quote unquote affordable housing, and if it's back to that jobs housing balance, if that then requires people to own a car and drive further, there's that cost as well associated with it. So that would be great to dig into that a little bit more. And then I know typically SNS doesn't provide specific policy recommendations, but I'm sort of struck by we came up with this desired trend of development, but our models are currently showing something different. So I don't know if there's either policy recommendations or examples from other locations that have changed that trajectory. And then back to the comment about state versus local, it's interesting to hear someone say that there's more of a state role, because from my perspective, the land use decisions are very local, but I think it depends on which space you're talking about. So that's another area, and I don't know if you can research that or someone else is doing it, in terms of what is that role of the state versus local government to, again, change that trajectory. What can we do at different state agencies versus what you all can do, and how do we work together to change that trajectory for a more sustainable community that we're all desiring. So mostly I just want to thank you for the work. That was fantastic.
Well, we are definitely encouraged by new master plans and comprehensive plans. And so, it's only been 5 years since this regional plan was adopted, and the local jurisdictions, it takes a long time to kind of revisit their master and comprehensive plans. So I think that's where that kind of like baseline scenario comes in. So, we would think that because Henderson Strong and the master plan for the city of Las Vegas and Transform Clark County are all getting updated or have been since the adoption of the regional policy plan, that we'd see more of those goals moving forward. So we may have caught the baseline still within the time frame of the baseline.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, this is Zane Marshall with the Water Authority. I have a couple of questions and comments.
Sure.
Hi, Ray. I assume that the jobs projection is an output of the fever modeling effort, and I was wondering if the pandemic, if there's been some thought to how the pandemic and the change that the community may go through in terms of how we work, like we're working today in this meeting, may impact the connectivity of jobs and houses. And so my thought is that there may be people moving here because it's less expensive than California or other areas that are actually working through telecommuting technology. And so I know that this research is based on, data 2019 and maybe further back, but I'm kind of wanting to do a thought exercise about how the pandemic and telecommuting technology may change that connection between jobs and housing needs in the community.
Yeah, part of this research, we did meet with the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, which is currently updating the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, but they had just started that. So they should be done in a couple of months, and then we'll use some of that information and hope that that type of projection is captured within, the future of economic development. The jobs kind of spatial analysis and projections come from DECATUR. And so we'll have to investigate a little bit more on how those processes might be influenced after the pandemic.
Right. And if I could just say, this is great work, and it's the information generated from this effort is something that's very interesting to me, because the way we develop certainly has an impact on consumptive water demands in the community. Yeah. So smaller lot size or multifamily housing is definitely a more efficient way to develop than large lot sizes and single family residence. So it's data that can help to inform our demand projections and our 50-year resource plan. So thank you.
Thank you. Very thoughtful. Anyone else wishing to comment?
Mayor March, this is MJ.
MJ.
Yeah, for the record. Sandra, thanks for that. When you talk about affordable housing and the cost of transportation, is that included? I think even when you look at the jobs housing balance map, I think here at the RTC, we're always talking about the connectivity of where the population is going to grow. The map shows us really the edges of the valley. And we go, at the RTC, we go right to, I wonder how we're going to be able to access those folks potentially with public transportation. So this is just, again, I want to make sure that we keep that as part of the equation, whether it's at some point when we start talking about sustainable transportation funding solution, that really this speaks to, again, the need for that, because where we grow here in the valley continues to spread outward rather than more of that infill development where you're going to find that more density in housing. So the cost of transportation has to be included in that conversation as well as affordable housing. I totally concur with you, Sandra.
Thank you, MJ. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for that presentation, Ray, and to your team. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Ray Lathrop again for the record. The next item is to receive an update on the extreme heat and vulnerability research led by our team. Mr. Paul Gully is here to provide an update.
Paul.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Again, Paul Gully for the record, and I know we are kind of running short on time and have a few more items to get to, so I'm going to try and speed through this for you all. But I'm happy to provide another update on this study. And this is good timing. We just held our third technical advisory group meeting a few weeks ago, and so we've managed to finalize a few pieces of this project, including our spatial analysis as well as the interactive web map that we previewed at our last meeting. Next slide. So this is just a reminder of what we were hoping to accomplish with the study. I think you've all seen it in previous meetings, so we can skip this one. And you've probably seen this one as well. We've kind of talked through the research we did to identify locally specific indicators for each dimension of extreme heat vulnerability, and that kind of allowed us to do the spatial analysis that we completed. Next slide. And so, yeah, in previous meetings, we've kind of talked through the mechanics of the spatial analysis. And at our last TAG meeting, we were actually able to go through this with our TAG members and to finalize the methodology and the results. Next slide. And so these are our final results. Again, the extreme heat vulnerability map is on the far right, and that's a composite of the three dimensions or components to its left. Next slide. And so in our last steering committee meeting, we previewed an early version of the Southern Nevada Extreme Heat Vulnerability Web Map, which is an interactive tool that allows users to dig into the results of our analysis a little bit. We've since made some updates to it based on feedback we received from our partners and TAG members, and I'm happy to say we are pretty much done with it. We finalized it. So the URL down at the bottom is kind of the shortened link to the map. I highly recommend you all check it out if you're interested in the research. We added some notes and some tips on the right that will be helpful to look at as you use the tool. And we also were able to add a bunch of census data to the map as well. So if you click anywhere within Clark County, you can get block group level demographic data. Next slide. All right, and then finally, we made some progress on the neighborhood profiles we previously mentioned that were being completed as part of the final report for the study. And again, the neighborhood profiles are really meant to highlight vulnerable areas that were found to exist within our region's urban core. And, you know, as part of these, we're going to be highlighting or referencing possible interventions or mitigation strategies that are specific to the conditions within each area. And these are really intended to provide some neighborhood level context to the overall heat study, which is more regional in nature. Next slide. I won't spend a lot of time here where these profiles are kind of still in the process of being developed, so they haven't been finalized yet. So at a future meeting, we can probably dig into the results a little bit more. But we've worked with each of the jurisdictions to choose areas that they're interested in learning more about. And we kind of strategically chose areas that highlight a range of different conditions from the population makeup to the built environment that contribute to higher levels of extreme heat vulnerability. And we thought that was important because some of the interventions we suggest might be applicable to other high scoring areas that are similar to the ones we highlight here. Next slide. And as far as next steps go, you know, we'll just be working on finalizing and updating our project fact sheet and webpage based on our analysis and findings, developing that final report that includes the neighborhood profiles, and then we do anticipate holding one more TAG meeting to kind of review and discuss the final report, talk through additional research or a phase 2 of this project, and then to plan for some type of rollout event or virtual presentation to share and highlight our findings. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Paul? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Ray?
Thank you. Ray Lathrop again, Manager of Regional Planning. I wanted to quickly review the regional planning team's work program proposal for next fiscal year, just to make sure that everyone on this committee knew kind of the things that we are planning to embark on. So with that, we'll start. This work program is going to be included in the Unified Planning Work Program, which is the MPO's annual work program. Next slide. Just so everyone knows, this is all the different pieces of the UPWP, and many of you probably interact with the transportation planning program in other capacities outside of the regional planning team. Next slide. So last year was our first time being included in the UPWP. We included a new task item for our regional plan administration and a new task item for the regional planning research. Next slide. We are not planning to make any changes, but continuing most of our regional plan administration activities, which is kind of all of the work that we do on a daily basis. keeping communications, newsletters, and our website up to date, as well as our opportunity site review in here and our annual report. Next slide. The task around planning research is a lot of the things that we continue to present and share with this committee, the housing and the heat. We did not start the tree canopy study last year, but we do have plans to revisit that study in the next fiscal year. We've connected with some faculty at UNLV, as well as some of the data and GIS specialists over at SNWA to help us kind of scope and plan for that research project. And our new research project that we talked with some partners about some additional needs is going to be around equity and outreach strategies. We've previously published a community outreach and community engagement toolkit on our website, which was updated to present digital and virtual resources as we transitioned into the pandemic. But our team is really interested in going and meeting some of our community members in the field and really asking them how they want to hear from planning studies and how they want to engage with some of these public processes. So we hope to just go ask some questions, provide some interviews and suggestions and recommendations for tactics on ways to get some feedback from our most hard to reach community members. If you guys have any thoughts on any of these research projects, we will probably likely continue our structure to have a technical advisory group. And so we encourage participation from any of you members on this committee to follow our research projects into the future. Next slide. I wanted to really quickly make sure you guys were aware, if some of you haven't been included in additional transportation planning studies, but things that intersect a lot with the vision of Southern Nevada Strong include currently a transportation and health impact study that's being led by the MPO, in addition to a walkability study. And if you'd like to know anything about those, if you haven't heard about them, there's some surveys available and walking audit opportunities. I'd really encourage you guys to get involved in some of those studies, and I'd be happy to connect you with the project managers. We're also leading or helping to support a Maryland Parkway transit-oriented development plan and a study in conjunction with the City of Las Vegas and Clark County. And those are currently under process, and we're looking at some of the station suggestions and recommendations before that study wraps up this summer. And we just received some new federal funding to look at serving some of our low-income communities and a project that we're calling the Southern Nevada Hope Grant. In the future, next year, in the UPWP, there's going to be they've outlined a regional transit-oriented development study, a Henderson sustainable mobility study, and regional transit center study, which we would also encourage you guys to maybe volunteer for or learn more about, as most of those will be likely to include elements of and additional information as related to Southern Nevada Strong and implementation of the regional policy plan. So I just wanted to flag for all of you that the MPO is doing some significant work with all of our local partners on also furthering and implementation of the regional plan as well. I know that was really quick, but if anyone has any questions about the work that we're doing this year or next year, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to encourage and get you to participate in any of our work.
Any questions or comments?
This is Sandra from NDOT. Just a quick comment about the excellent work that the RTC team does. The MPO staff, the Southern Nevada staff, really the professionalism, the level of work, the types of tough issues they're diving into. Every time I think I have a great idea on something we can partner with you guys on in terms of upcoming issues, Andrew and others are like, oh yeah, we're already working on that. We'll let you know what we're doing. So, and especially because MJ's here, I want to say, you know, your team is fantastic. They're great to work with and they do really, really great work.
Exactly what Sandra said.
Yeah,
yes. They are amazing. They are amazing. I concur.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, but before we do, I just need to point out I have to run down to our city clerk's office for a meeting with the staff. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Nancy Amundson, and she'll be chairing the rest of the meeting. So thank you very much.
I was nice enough to put on my camera, so there you go.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to go ahead and start this item. Actually, item number 8 is a chance to share any current activities from our partners around the committee around work that is furthering implementation of the regional plan. So if anyone has any work and ongoing activities that you're involved in that you wanted to share with the committee, this is an opportunity to do that. But maybe we're out of time too and everyone's interested.
Hey Ray, Marco Vallata.
Yeah.
Marco Vallata here. Marco Vallata, City of Las Vegas, for the record. Just as we've mentioned in previous committee meetings, our City of Las Vegas 2050 master plan was, it's been mentioned earlier today, was recommended for approval at the April 13th Planning Commission meeting and will be on the May 19th City Council meeting, and will be in the ordinance process on that as well. So those are upcoming, and those definitely help further the Southern Nevada Strong Regional Plan. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
And this is Nancy. I just would like to point out that we're still working. It's ongoing. Our Transform Clark County, our master plan update, as well as our zoning code update. And I would recommend anyone who wants to see where we are to go on transformclarkcounty.com and look at our documents, look at our time frames. We're moving along very quickly. We thought the pandemic would slow us down, but we are right on time.
Great.
This is Bob Fielden, and I'd like to report that ULI is having a virtual workshop on how to dismember NIMBYism. So if any of you are interested in that, you might contact Tara Harvey at ULI to register for that virtual meeting and session. And with that will come a textbook that has been used in Florida for addressing and resolving NIMBYism issues there. So thank you.
Andrew Rother at the City of Henderson. Just want to jump in and say we're still working on our development code. There's a lot of implementation of the regional plan and the city's comprehensive plan that was in alignment with the regional plan. We hope to have that done soon. We are working through kind of the last stages, and we'll begin our outreach period, and we hope to have that approved sometime in the near future.
Okay.
Any other comments? Then I will turn the next item over to Ray.
Thank you very much. Our next item is to discuss future agenda items. At this time, staff seeks guidance from any of the committee members on things that we should present or invite for future committee meetings. Does anyone have any suggestions? Doesn't sound like it.
No, this is Sandra. Maybe I think, like many of you, I'm kind of caught up in legislative activities right now, but maybe a summary of legislative actions that might impact the work that you all are doing, because I know there are couple bills related to, housing affordability, I think. I know there's a number of transportation ones, so maybe just kind of a summary of actions of interest of the legislature.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else have suggestions? I don't think, and Ray can tell me if I'm wrong, if you think of something or you go, because I just thought of something, but I don't want to volunteer other people. So if you think of something, maybe coordinate with Ray and see if we can get it on the next agenda or not. But this is not the drop dead end for us. If you have something that you think would be worthwhile and you just want to talk to staff or other agencies, let us know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always open for suggestions and discussion about future agenda items. Yeah.
And if no one else has anything to say, we'll move on to item 10.
Okay. Item 10 is our last citizens participation. This is the second time for citizens participation, and I'm going to ask Maren if there was any comments provided via email or for the written record.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Vice Chairwoman and Ray. There are no public comments at this time.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to end our meeting. Everyone wants to stay, I guess.
Motion to end the meeting. Andrew Rother, City of Henderson.
We have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And I just wanted to say thank you to the RTC staff, Ray in particular, for all that you do for us. We do appreciate it. You've been working hard even through the pandemic. So thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you all.